week 15 of the fantasy football season. He has a few defense DST units. I have his sleepers this week. The first one, the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers coming off by out there in 91% of fantasy leagues. And they got a slam dunk matchup at the New Orleans Saints that give up the fourth most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. Even though this Saint offense is obviously played better and Tyler Shuck's gotten better over the last few weeks, which is a good thing for the Saints to see a rookie quarterback progress the last few weeks. Week 10 versus Saint team, 17 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 11 at Atlanta, 27 points allowed, a fumble recovery. Week 12 at San Francisco, 20 points allowed, 3 interceptions. And Week 13 versus the Rams, 28 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 INTs, 1 for a touchdown and a fumble recovery. So this week, like I said, good matchup at the Saints. I know going back to Week 10, they didn't do much in that game, but they could get to the quarterback. They've been creating more turnovers, especially the last couple weeks, is this Carolina defense. Another thing as well, coming off by getting healthier and getting refreshed for the stretch run here can help this Panther defense as well, and not dealing with outside elements where they're indoors in the dome. So with those factors, I think they're a good sleeper option this week. The next DST, the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys defense, I know they're giving up points, but this week I'm just going off a matchup as a sleeper option where the Vikings give up the third most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. And Dallas, they're out there right now in 76% of fantasy leagues. The last few weeks for them, Week 12 versus Philly, 21 points allowed, a sack, 2 fumble recoveries. Week 13 versus Kansas City, 28 points allowed, 3 sacks. And Week 14 at Detroit, they got hammered on defense, 44 points allowed, a sack and a block kick. So like I said, Minnesota does give up the third most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. J.J. McCarthy, he's been a crash test dummy, taking a lot of sacks this season and turning the football over a decent amount of times as well. Even though he did go out there last week and have a good ball game, J.J. McCarthy, that Commander defense is just depleted. And I think this week, this Cowboy defense definitely got reinforcements at the deadline and some guys back from injury, even though the last couple weeks they've versed 3 high-powered offenses in a row. And for the most part, besides last week's game, they held their own. So I think this Cowboy defense as a sleeper option could be decent for owners this week. And the final defense, DST, I have as a sleeper is the Chicago Bears. The Bears, they're still out there in 64% of fantasy leagues, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season is this Cleveland Brown offense. So the last couple weeks, the points haven't been great for the Chicago DST, but 2 good offenses they versed in Philadelphia and Green Bay the last few weeks. But this week, I think they could get back to basics and play a good game. Week 12 versus Pittsburgh, 22 points allowed, 2 sacks and INT, a fumble recovery. Week 13 at the Eagles, 15 points allowed, and an interception, a fumble recovery. In Week 14, a tough game at division rival, the Packers, 28 points allowed, a sack and interception. So this week, like I said, good streaming option, 5th most fantasy points they give up is Cleveland to DSTs on the season. And the Chicago Bear defense, they do create turnovers. They get to the quarterback, and with a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders in there, even though last week he definitely looked good and they named him the starter of the remainder of the season, I still think in Soldier Field, where it's going to be freezing weather, it could be a long day for Shedeur and this offense. In Chicago could be a decent sleeper option. So that's a few defense DST units I have as sleepers for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.